The stars had been quiet for a very long time. Humanity had looked up at the night sky for thousands of years, wondering if they were alone. They built telescopes. They sent radio signals into the darkness. They dreamed of meeting other beings who lived among the distant lights. They should have been more careful about what they wished for. The Dominion arrived on a Tuesday morning. 3,000 warships appeared above Earth without warning. They came out of fold space like sharks rising from deep water. Their vessels were black and angular, covered in weapons that glowed with strange energy. The smallest of their ships was larger than any building humans had ever constructed. The largest was the size of a small moon. People around the world stopped what they were doing and looked up. Cars crashed on highways. Planes circled airports without landing. Children pointed at the sky and asked their parents what was happening. Nobody had an answer. High Arbiter stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 eyes that never blinked. He had conquered 37 worlds in his career. He had watched species beg and cry and offer everything they had for mercy. He had never given it to them. Earth was just another world to add to his collection. He activated the transmission array and projected his image to every screen on the planet. His face appeared on televisions, phones, computers, and billboards. His voice spoke in every language at once, translated by technology humans could not understand. "People of Earth," he said, his voice cold and bored. "I am High Arbiter and of the Dominion. Your world now falls under our jurisdiction. You have 30 of your planetary rotations to comply with our demands." He listed the demands slowly, making sure every human understood their new reality. First, all military forces would surrender their weapons and vehicles. Every gun, every tank, every ship, and every missile would be handed over to collection teams. Second, all humans would submit to genetic. Their DNA would be recorded and analyzed. Those with useful traits would be selected for breeding programs. Those without value would be assigned to labor details. Third, humanity would accept their official designation as a Tier 7 servitor species. They would serve the Dominion in whatever capacity the Dominion required. They would have no rights, no representation, and no future except what they allowed them. Resistance is not advised, and concluded. We have sterilized planets before. We will do so again if necessary. You have 30 days. The transmission ended. The ships remained, blocking out the sun like a permanent storm cloud. In Geneva, the United Earth Council met within hours. Presidents and prime ministers and generals gathered in a secure bunker deep beneath the Alps. They shouted at each other across a long table, their faces pale with fear and anger. General of the United States Space Force presented the military assessment first. His voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly as he pointed at the holographic display. We have 47 orbital defense platforms and about 200 combat-capable spacecraft. Against their fleet, he paused and took a breath. We estimate we could last approximately 8 minutes before total destruction. The room fell silent. So we negotiate, said Prime Minister of Japan. We find out what they really want, we buy time. They told us what they want, replied President of the African Union. They want us as slaves, there is nothing to negotiate. Then we fight, said General Wei of China. We die on our feet, not on our knees. And what about our children? Asked Chancellor of Europe. Do they die on their feet too? The arguing continued for hours. Some wanted to fight, some wanted to surrender, some wanted to hide and hope the aliens would go away. Nobody had a real solution. Nobody had any hope. Then a door opened at the back of the room. A woman walked in. She was in her 60s, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that had seen too many secrets. She wore a simple black suit with no medals or insignia. Most of the leaders had never seen her before. Who are you? Demanded General. This is a restricted meeting. My name is, she said calmly. I am the director of the Office of Contingency Planning, and I need to brief you on Project Prometheus. President of the World Council frowned. I have never heard of your office or your project. That was the point, sir. Walked to the front of the room and placed a small device on the table. A new holographic display appeared, showing documents and blueprints and images that made several generals gasp. 73 years ago, a damaged spacecraft crashed in the outer reaches of our solar system. We recovered it in secret. Inside, we found the body of an alien being different from these. We also found technology far beyond our understanding. Star charts, engine designs, weapons systems. She paused to let this sink in. But the most important thing we found was a warning, a message from a dying species explaining how they were destroyed by the Dominion. They sent their last ship into the void, hoping someone would find it, hoping someone would learn from their fate. Changed the display. Now it showed massive underground facilities hidden beneath mountains and oceans. It showed factories and shipyards and research centers that had never appeared on any government budget. For 70 years, we have prepared for this day. Every major nation has contributed resources in secret. We built our preparations deep underground where satellites could not see. We developed technology that matches and exceeds what they possess. We trained soldiers and scientists and engineers for a war we hoped would never come. The room was completely silent now. We knew they were coming, continued. Not these specific aliens, but someone like them. The universe is old and dark and full of predators. We refuse to be prey. She looked around at the assembled leaders, and for the first time she smiled. Ladies, and humanity does have a choice. We can surrender and become slaves forever, or we can show the galaxy what happens when you threaten the human race. General stared at the holographic display. His hands had stopped shaking. How do we respond to their ultimatum? He asked. Smile grew wider. We don't, not yet. We go silent. We let them wonder. We let them wait. And on the 31st day, we give them our answer. For the first time since the ships appeared, hope entered the room. It was small and fragile like a candle flame in a hurricane, but it was there. Humanity had a secret, and they were about to share it with the stars. On the first day after the ultimatum, the expected panic. They had seen it 100 times before, desperate transmissions begging for more time, leaders offering bribes and promises, military forces attempting futile attacks against the orbiting fleet. The first day was always chaos. But Earth went quiet. High Arbiter and stood at the observation window of his flagship and looked down at the blue and green world below. No transmissions came from the surface. No ships launched. No weapons fired. The planet simply continued turning, as if 3,000 warships were not hanging above it like a death sentence. Perhaps they are in shock, said Subcommander, standing at attention behind his superior. They may need time to process our demands. Perhaps, and agreed, but something felt wrong. He had conquered many worlds and he knew the patterns of fear. This was not shock, this was something else. On the 5th day, the silence continued, and sent probe ships to scan the major cities. What they found confused him. The cities were not empty. People walked the streets and drove their vehicles and went about their daily lives, but they moved with purpose, not panic. Factories that had produced consumer goods now produced something else. Materials flowed into hidden locations that the probes could not scan. They are preparing to fight, said, a pathetic gesture but expected from primitives. No, and replied slowly. When species prepare to fight us, they build weapons in the open. They want us to see their defiance. They want to die with honor. He pointed at the display. These humans are hiding something. They do not want us to know what they are building. On the 10th day, and sent ground probes to observe more closely. 4 of them vanished without sending any data. 3 more were destroyed by missiles that moved faster than any technology that had recorded from Earth. The remaining probes showed images of humans working in coordinated teams, moving equipment underground and smiling. The smiling bothered him most of all. Why do they smile? He asked his intelligence officers. They face extinction. They should be crying, screaming, begging for mercy. Why do they smile? Nobody had an answer. On the 15th day, a scout ship attempted to land near a human military base. It was shot down before it reached the atmosphere. The weapon that destroyed it left no debris. The ship simply ceased to exist. And ordered a full sensor sweep of the planet. The results were disturbing. Energy signatures that had not existed 15 days ago now pulsed beneath every major landmass. The humans were powering up something massive, something that had been hidden for a very long time. Should we attack now, High Arbiter? Asked, before they can complete their preparations. And considered this. Standard doctrine said to crush resistance before it could organize, but he hesitated. Something about this situation made him uncomfortable. They had dominated the Orion Arm for 12,000 years because they understood power. They knew when to strike and when to wait. Right now, his instincts told him to wait. We gave them 30 days, he said finally. We will honor that deadline, let them prepare their futile defense. It will make their defeat more complete. But in the dark of his private quarters that night, and wondered if he was making a mistake. On the 20th day, the humans broke their silence, not with a surrender or a plea, but with a simple question. A transmission arrived at the flagship from a single source on Earth's surface. Hi Arbiter, and this is Director of the United Earth Defense Council. I have a question for you. And was surprised enough to respond. Ask your question, human. In your 12,000 years of conquest, has any species ever refused your ultimatum and survived? The question hung in the air, and felt his 4 eyes narrow. No, he admitted. Those who resist are destroyed. This is the way of the universe. Thank you for confirming that, replied. Her voice was calm, almost cheerful. We wanted to make sure we understood the situation correctly. You cannot win this fight, human. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your ships cannot match ours. Surrender is your only option for survival. There was a pause, then spoke again. Hi Arbiter, I want to tell you a story. 70 years ago, we found a ship drifting in the outer reaches of our solar system. It was damaged and old, and everyone inside was dead. But they left us a gift. They left us knowledge. They left us a warning about empires like yours. And felt something cold settle in his stomach. What ship? What species? We don't know their name. Their language was too different from ours. But we understood their message. They told us what the Dominion does to weaker species. They told us how you enslave and destroy and consume everything in your path. Paused. And they told us how to stop you. The transmission ended, and stood in the command center, surrounded by officers who looked as confused as he felt. No species had ever spoken to the Dominion like this. No species had ever shown such confidence in the face of certain death. On the 25th day, something impossible happened. The sun flickered. Not Earth's sun, the stars throughout the entire Dominion. Reports flooded in from across the Empire. 900 star systems reported the same phenomenon at exactly the same moment. Every sun dimmed for exactly 1.7 seconds, then returned to normal. Stars could not flicker. Stars were massive balls of burning gas that followed the laws of physics. They did not blink like candles in the wind. But they had, and received a new transmission from Earth. It contained a single image, a star chart showing every system in the Dominion with every sun marked in red. Beneath the image were 4 words in the language. We know where you live. For the first time in his long career, High Arbiter and felt afraid. Not of the humans' weapons or their ships, but of their silence, of their smiles, of their absolute refusal to behave like prey. On the 29th day, the human leader sent a final message. We received your ultimatum. We have our response prepared. We wanted to give you the full 30 days to reconsider your position. You wish to negotiate? And asked, hoping the answer was yes. No, the human replied. We wanted to give you time to run. The transmission ended. Above Earth, 3,000 warships waited for the dawn of the 31st day. Their crews were nervous now, though they tried to hide it. They had never faced a species like this before. They had never been afraid of primitives. But as the hours counted down, many of them wished they had listened to the humans' warning. Many of them wished they had run. The 31st day began with the first light of dawn spreading across Earth's Pacific Ocean. High Arbiter and watched the sunrise from his command deck and felt nothing but cold determination. The deadline had passed. The humans had made their choice. Now they would pay for it. All ships assume bombardment formation, he commanded. Target their major population centers first. We will turn their cities to glass and their oceans to steam. Let this serve as a lesson to any other species that dares to defy us. The fleet began to move. 3,000 warships arranged themselves in a precise pattern, their weapons charging with enough energy to burn the atmosphere off a planet. The officers worked with quiet efficiency. This was routine for them. They had done it many times before. The first volley was armed and ready, and raised his hand to give the order. Then every sun in the galaxy flickered again. This time the darkness lasted 3 seconds. 3 seconds of absolute blackness across 900 star systems. Ships lost power, stations went dark, communications failed. For 3 eternal seconds the Dominion was blind and helpless. When the lights returned, the universe had changed. A fleet appeared around Earth, not the small orbital defense force the had, but something else entirely. Ships emerged from fold space in perfect formation, surrounding the armada like wolves circling a wounded animal. There were hundreds of them, and each one was wrong in ways that made officers gasp. The human ships did not look like ships. They looked like weapons given form. Their hulls were smooth and dark, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. They had no visible engines, no visible weapons ports, nothing that made sense according to any technology they understood. They simply existed, hanging in space like holes in reality. And at the center of the human fleet was a vessel that made An's flagship look like a toy. It was 5 kilometers long. Its surface shifted and changed as he watched, as if it was made of liquid metal or living tissue. Energy patterns rippled across its hull in colors that hurt his eyes. It radiated power in ways his sensors could not measure. "What is that?" whispered, his voice shaking. Before An could answer, a transmission cut through all frequencies. A human face appeared on every screen. It was a man with dark skin and gray hair, wearing a simple military uniform. His eyes were calm and steady. "This is Admiral James of the Terran Expeditionary Force," he announced. "You came to our world with threats and demands. You expected to find a primitive species, easy to conquer and enslave. You were wrong." The Admiral paused to let his words sink in. 70 years ago, we found a dying ship from a species your empire had destroyed. They gave us everything they had learned about your technology, your tactics, your weaknesses. We have spent every day since then preparing for this moment." On the command deck, officers were shouting reports. The human ships were not just surrounding them. They were jamming communications, blocking retreat paths, and targeting weapons arrays with precision that should have been impossible. "Impossible," Subcommander muttered. "Primitives cannot develop this technology in 70 years. It would take centuries." "We work fast when we have to," Admiral replied, as if he had heard the comment. "That is what happens when your entire species knows that monsters are coming. We stopped fighting each other. We pooled every resource, every scientist, every idea. We built weapons that your empire has never seen, and now we are going to show you what happens when you threaten our home." And forced his voice to remain steady. "You cannot defeat us, human. Even if you destroy this fleet, the Dominion will send more. You will never know peace again." "We are counting on that," replied. "But first, let us demonstrate what you are facing." The massive human ship at the center of the fleet began to glow. Energy gathered at its bow, swirling and building like a star being born. Then it fired. A beam of pure light shot past the fleet and struck one of their supply ships at the rear. The supply ship was not destroyed. It simply vanished. One moment it existed, the next moment it did not. No explosion, no debris, no residual energy. It was erased from reality. The fleet went silent. Every officer stared at their screens, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. "That was a warning shot," said. "We targeted a supply vessel with no crew. We do not wish to kill your soldiers, they are just following orders. But make no mistake, we can destroy every ship in your fleet in approximately 11 minutes. We have run the simulations. We know how this ends." "Then why haven't you?" An demanded. "If you can destroy us, why talk?" "Because killing is not our purpose," the Admiral replied. "We built these weapons to protect ourselves, not to conquer. We have no interest in your empire or your territory. We just want to be left alone." He leaned forward and his eyes hardened. "But if you force us to fight, we will not stop until every ship is dust. Every colony is liberated. Every slave is freed. We will take apart your empire piece by piece, not because we want it, but because we will not allow you to threaten us or anyone else ever again." And looked at his tactical display. The human ships had them completely surrounded. His weapons were jammed. His engines were locked. His fleet was trapped, and his soldiers were afraid. "You expect me to surrender?" he asked. "No," said. "I expect you to fight. Every tyrant fights when their power is challenged. So fight, High Arbiter. Give the order. Let your soldiers die for your pride." He paused. "Or you can be the first leader in 12,000 years to make a different choice. You can order your fleet to stand down. You can return to your empire and tell them what you have seen. You can give them a message from humanity." "What message?" Admiral smiled, and it was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a species that had spent 70 years preparing for this moment and was almost disappointed that it had been so easy. Tell them we are watching. Tell them we will be watching forever. Tell them that any empire that threatens a weaker species, any civilization that enslaves and destroys, they will find us waiting. The transmission shifted to show the star chart again. 900 suns, all marked in red, all vulnerable. Tell them that humanity remembers what it felt like to be afraid of the dark, and we have decided that no other species should ever feel that fear again. And looked at his officers. He looked at his fleet. He looked at the impossible ships that surrounded him and the impossible weapon that could erase his existence with a single shot. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to be prey. All ships, he said quietly, stand down. The battle was over before it truly began. Humanity had given their reply to the ultimatum. And the stars would never forget it. The surrender of the fleet was broadcast across the galaxy. Every species with the technology to receive transmissions watched in disbelief as 3,000 warships powered down their weapons and lowered their shields. They saw the impossible human ships surrounding the most powerful military force in known space. They saw High Arbiter and the conqueror of 37 worlds kneel before a holographic projection of a human admiral. For 12,000 years, the Dominion had been undefeated. For 12,000 years, lesser species had submitted or died. Now everything had changed, and the galaxy did not know what to do with this new reality. On the command deck of the human flagship, Admiral James studied the kneeling with careful eyes. He felt no satisfaction at this victory, only a heavy sense of responsibility for what came next. "Rise, High Arbiter," he said. "Kneeling gains you nothing." And stood slowly. His 4 eyes burned with hatred and humiliation, but also with something else. Curiosity, fear, a desperate need to understand. "You have won," they said. "What are your terms? How much of our territory do you demand? How many of our colonies will you claim?" Shook his head. "We do not want your territory. We do not want your colonies. We do not want your resources or your technology or your allegiance." En's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Every conqueror wants something. Power is not gained for its own sake. What is your hidden purpose?" "Our purpose is not hidden," replied. "We want you to go home. We want you to release every species you have enslaved. We want you to close your genetic facilities and dismantle your slave markets. And we want you to spread a message to every corner of the galaxy." "What message?" Transmitted a document to the flagship. It appeared on every screen, a single page written in simple language that any species could understand. At the top was a symbol, a blue circle containing the silhouette of a human figure with arms outstretched, surrounded by stars. "This is the Terran Doctrine," the Admiral explained. "It states our intentions clearly so that no species can claim ignorance." And read the document with growing disbelief. The doctrine was simple. Humanity claimed no empire and sought no subjects. They would not interfere in the internal affairs of other species. They would not impose their values or beliefs or systems of government on anyone. But they would respond to threats. Any species that attacked Earth or its allies would face the full power of the Terran fleet. Any empire that enslaved developing civilizations would find human ships in their space. Any military force that bombarded defenseless worlds would discover that humanity was watching and willing to act. "You cannot enforce this," and said, though his voice lacked conviction. "The galaxy is vast, you cannot be everywhere at once." "We don't need to be everywhere," replied. "We just need everyone to believe we might be. That is the power of reputation, High Arbiter. You understood this when you built your empire. You conquered through fear, fear of what you would do if anyone resisted." He paused and let the next words sink in. "Now there is something more frightening than the Dominion. There is us." And studied the human admiral for a long moment. "Why, you have the power to rule the galaxy. Why settle for this guardianship?" "Because we know what empires become," said quietly. "We studied our own history very carefully when we prepared for this day. Every human empire eventually fell because power corrupts, because rulers who start with good intentions become tyrants over time. We decided not to make that mistake." He gestured at the blue sphere of Earth, visible through the observation window. "That is our home, that is all we want to protect. But we learned a hard lesson when your fleet appeared in our sky. We learned that no one is safe while predators roam the stars. So we made a choice. Instead of building an empire, we would build a shield. Instead of conquering others, we would stop others from conquering. You are idealists, and said, making the word sound like an insult. Idealism dies in the face of reality. Perhaps, agreed, but we prefer to call it stubbornness. Humans are very stubborn, high arbiter. We do not give up easily, we do not surrender, and we do not forget. The fleet was escorted to the edge of the solar system. Before they entered Fold Space for the journey home and sent a private message to Admiral. You have made a powerful enemy today, human. The Dominion will not forget this humiliation. We will study your technology, we will find your weaknesses, and we will return. His reply was calm. We are counting on it. Every time you return, we will be stronger. Every time you attack, we will defeat you. Every time you threaten, we will remind you what happened today. Eventually, you will learn, or you will be destroyed. The choice is yours. The fleet vanished into Fold Space. On Earth, the news of victory spread like wildfire. People danced in the streets. Governments declared holidays. Children who had grown up knowing that monsters were coming to enslave them learned that monsters could be defeated. But Admiral did not celebrate. He stood at the window of his flagship and looked at the stars with tired eyes. "Is it over, sir?" asked his aide, a young woman named Captain Sarah. "No," replied. "It is just beginning. They will tell their story and other empires will hear it. Some will be afraid, and that is good. Fear will keep them at bay, but others will see us as a challenge. They will want to test their strength against ours." He turned to face her. "We have made ourselves the guardians of the galaxy, Captain. We have declared that the strong will no longer prey upon the weak. That is a promise we must keep forever. If we ever fail, if we ever break that promise, every species that trusted us will suffer." "That is a heavy burden, sir." "Yes," agreed, "but someone has to carry it. Humanity spent its history fighting itself, destroying itself, proving how cruel and violent we could be. Now we have a chance to be something better. We have a chance to use our talent for war to protect instead of destroy." He looked back at the stars. "We were afraid of the dark for so long. We wondered if we were alone, and we feared what we might find if we weren't. Now we know the truth. The universe is full of civilizations, and many of them are cruel. Many of them prey on the weak." His jaw tightened with determination. "We will be the reason they stop. We will be the species that makes the galaxy safe. Not because we are the strongest or the best, but because we are willing to do what others won't. We are willing to stand between the hunters and the hunted. We are willing to say no." Captain nodded slowly. "And if we can't protect everyone?" "Then we try anyway," said. "And we never stop trying. That is what it means to be human, Captain. We fail and we get up. We lose and we fight again. We see darkness and we light candles." He smiled for the first time since the battle. "The stars have never seen anything like us before. Let us make sure they never forget." The Terran doctrine spread across the galaxy in the following months. Some species cheered it, some cursed it, some did not believe it. But all of them remembered. And all of them began to watch the stars with new eyes, wondering when the humans would appear next. 300 years had passed since the day humanity answered the ultimatum. The galaxy had changed beyond recognition, and the humans were responsible for most of it. The Dominion still existed, but it was a shadow of its former self. Within 50 years of their defeat at Earth, their servitor species had begun to revolt. The humans did not start these rebellions, but they finished them. Whenever a fleet moved to crush an uprising, Terran ships appeared from nowhere to block their path. Whenever soldiers landed to punish a rebellious world, human soldiers landed beside the rebels. They tried to fight back. They developed new weapons and new strategies. They formed alliances with other predator empires. 3 times they launched massive attacks against human space. 3 times they were defeated, each time more completely than the last. Eventually, they simply gave up. The great empire that had ruled the Orion Arm for 12,000 years shrank until it controlled only its original home systems. The conquerors became traders. The slavers became merchants. It was not a noble transformation. They adapted because they had no other choice. But the result was the same. The Dominion stopped hurting people. Other empires watched and learned. The collective was the first to test human resolve after the. They were an ancient species of beings who consumed other civilizations like locusts consuming crops. When they set their sights on the newly spacefaring, they expected an easy harvest. Human ships arrived within 3 days. They were confused. They had no alliance with Earth. They had never even met a human before. Why would humanity risk war to protect strangers? Because you are about to hurt them, explained the human ambassador, a tired-looking woman named Commander, granddaughter of the famous admiral. That is reason enough. They refused to back down. They believed their numbers would overwhelm the human fleet. They were wrong. The battle lasted 4 hours, and when it ended, the collective had lost 60% of their military force. They never threatened another developing species again. Word spread. The humans would fight for anyone. They did not ask for payment or loyalty or gratitude. They simply appeared whenever the strong tried to prey upon the weak, and they stayed until the threat was gone. Some species called them angels, others called them fools. The predator empires called them much worse things, but everyone called them something because everyone knew they were real. By the 300th anniversary of the Ultimatum, 17 species had achieved spacefaring status under human protection. These were civilizations that would have been enslaved or destroyed in earlier centuries, but instead were free to grow and develop and make their own choices. The humans asked nothing from them. They offered technology and advice when requested, but they never imposed their will. They were careful not to become the very thing they had sworn to oppose. Earth itself remained modest. The humans had not expanded beyond their original solar system except for a few research stations and patrol bases. They had no colonies, no subject worlds, no tribute flowing into their coffers. Their power came not from territory but from reputation, the absolute certainty that crossing them would end badly. The Galactic Forum was held that year on a space station orbiting a neutral star. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered to discuss trade and diplomacy and the future of interstellar civilization. The human delegation was small, just a dozen diplomats and their staff, but they received more attention than any other group. Ambassador Maya represented Earth at the forum. She was young for a diplomat, barely 40 years old, but she carried herself with the quiet confidence of her famous family. 3 generations had served humanity among the stars, and she intended to continue that tradition. On the final night of the forum, an elderly elder approached her during the celebration banquet. His name was Predecessor, and he was one of the oldest living beings of his kind. He had been born in the early days of human protection, when his species had just discovered fire and were looking up at the stars with wonder and fear. "Ambassador," he said, his translator converting his clicking speech into clear human words, "may I speak with you?" "Of course, Predecessor," Maya gestured to a quiet alcove away from the crowd. "How can I help you?" The old studied her for a long moment. "I have a question that has troubled my people for generations. We have debated it in our councils and our temples. Our philosophers have written countless works attempting to answer it, but we have never found an answer that satisfies us." "What is the question?" "Why?" The predecessor's voice was soft but intense. "Why do you protect us? You owe us nothing. You gain nothing from helping us. Your soldiers have died defending our worlds, and we have given you nothing in return. Why do you do it?" Maya considered the question carefully. It was not new. Every species asked it eventually, but it deserved a thoughtful answer. 300 years ago, she said, humanity looked up at the stars and felt alone. We wondered if anyone else existed in the vast darkness. We hoped that if other beings were out there, they might be friendly. We hoped that if we ever needed help, someone would come. She paused, remembering the stories her grandfather had told her about those early days. When they arrived, we learned the truth. The galaxy was not friendly. No one was coming to save us. We were alone against an empire that wanted to enslave us forever. "But you won," the predecessor pointed out. "You defeated them." "Yes, we prepared for 70 years and we won, but we never forgot how it felt to be afraid. We never forgot the despair of believing no one would help us." Maya met the old sighs. "So we decided to become the help we wished we had." The predecessor was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he began to laugh. It was a clicking, chittering sound that drew curious glances from nearby delegates. "I finally understand," he said. "The galaxy has spent 3 centuries fearing the wrong thing." "What do you mean?" "They fear your weapons. They fear your ships and your soldiers and your technology. They tell stories about the terrible power of humanity and how you could destroy anyone who opposes you." He shook his head in wonder. "But that is not what makes you terrifying. Maya waited. What terrifies the stars, the predecessor continued, is that you actually mean it. Every empire in history has claimed noble purpose while pursuing power. Every conqueror has spoken of peace while building weapons of war. But you genuinely just want to help. He gestured at the banquet hall, at the dozens of free species that existed, because humanity had chosen to protect them. A species that cannot be bought, cannot be threatened, cannot be reasoned with, and whose only ambition is to protect the weak. That is the most frightening thing the universe has ever seen, because there is no way to defeat you. There is no compromise that will satisfy you. There is only submission to your one simple demand: stop hurting people. Maya smiled. That does sound rather terrifying when you put it that way. It is terrifying, the predecessor agreed. And it is beautiful. For the first time in galactic history, the powerful fear the powerless. They fear what you might do if they threaten us. They fear the consequences of their own cruelty. He reached out and touched her hand with his own. Thank you, he said simply. Thank you for being exactly what you appear to be. Thank you for never changing. Thank you for showing the galaxy that power does not have to mean cruelty. Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. She had heard many things about humanity over her career: admiration, fear, resentment, suspicion. But simple gratitude was rare. It reminded her why her family had devoted their lives to this work. We will never stop, she promised. As long as there are predators among the stars, there will be humans standing against them. That is our legacy. That is who we chose to be. The predecessor smiled. Then let us raise a glass, he said, to humanity, the galaxy's most terrifying species. Maya raised her glass. To humanity, she agreed. May we always be worthy of the fear we inspire. Outside the station, the stars burned in the endless dark. Somewhere out there, a young species was looking up at those lights and wondering if they were alone, wondering if anything good lived among the distant suns. They were not alone, and help would always come. This was humanity's gift to the galaxy, not conquest, not empire, not dominion, but hope. The simple, stubborn, terrifying hope that someone out there cared enough to protect the helpless. 300 years ago, they had issued an ultimatum and expected humanity to kneel. Instead, humanity had stood up, and the stars had never stopped trembling.